I would like to begin the panel discussion portion. All right. We have Bill Sundew, human rights lawyer. We have Faisal Siddiqui of the Kamloops Islamic Association. We have Martha Ashbaugh from RAFT, Refugees and Friends Together. And we have Paul Lagacé, who is the executive director here at Kamloops Immigrant Services. I see Imam Mazhar Mahmoud has just joined us as well. So, Imam, welcome. And we'll actually be making a place for Imam to join our panel as well. So first of all, I'm going to ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves and their organizations in a little bit greater detail. So, Imam, will you go first?
So my name is Mazhar Mahmoud. I serve as an imam at the Kamloops Islamic Association, as well as a director for the Imam Services Inc., as well as writer for the Mathaba Foundation based in Toronto, and the General Secretary for the Imams Association of Western Canada based in Saskatoon. So yeah, that's me.
Hi everyone, my name is Bill Sundew. I'm a lawyer, former judge. I have a master's degree from University of Oxford in International Human Rights Law. That's my real passion. I'm on the list of counsel at the International Criminal Court in The Hague that deals with genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. That is relevant given what's happening also in Syria. From a legal issue perspective. And I've also spent a couple of stints in the recent past in Tunisia in the aftermath of the so-called Arab Spring, which was discussed briefly this morning, training judges in the administration of justice in human rights law. And so I hope to bring a human rights perspective to this entire issue and discussion.
Hello, everyone. Before I introduce myself, I just want to take credit of bringing this wonderful man, Imam, to Kamloops. I'm the president of Kamloops Islamic Association, and we have a mosque here in Kamloops. I don't know if many of you knew that there is a mosque. The association is, run by board of directors. We are 5 of us. We are all volunteers, and our role is that we administer the day-to-day function of the mosque, and the association has also employed full-time imam. We are really blessed to have him here in our community, and he delivers a number of programs and services in Kamloops community here. And our role during this refugee settlement process would be that we'll be working closely with other agencies and organizations such as RAFT and Kamloops Immigrant Services. We just want to make sure that those refugees have shown through collaborative approach an accelerated path to integrate into the society as soon as possible.
Hi, I'm Martha Ashbaugh. I'm with Refugees and Friends Together, known as RAFT. We are a sponsoring group here in Kamloops. We've been in existence for over 35 years in a quiet, low-key kind of way. And we're now much better known and a much larger group than we were just a very few months ago. There's a lot of RAFT members here today, and I think some people may want to talk to somebody because I've been approached by several people who've realized who I am. So I'm just going to ask that the RAFT members pop up wherever they are and then pop down again, please. So Dave's way over there in the treasure, but yeah, there's a whole lot of us here today, so thank you. We are expecting to sponsor 4 families at the moment, privately, and through the Blended Visa Office Referred program for 3 of them. We're working closely with Kamloops Immigrant Services, which we do all the time because there's such a support when we have a new family in town. And the Islamic Association, the Jewish community is part of our group, the Buddhists are supportive. It's just an amazing experience that we're having right at the moment. So we don't know when anyone's coming. I'll get that clear right now.
I'm Paul Lagasse. I'm the Executive Director with Kamloops Immigrant Services, and my role here at this agency has been to support staff doing their job. I don't govern how people do their work. I just follow up on anything that they need in order to accomplish those tasks. And part of that work is to establish and help people establish in the community with regards to everything that involves settlement. Language and community connections. As well, for the community at large, we have a diversity program which presently is managed by Graham Specht. And the goal of that program is to inform people. And so this is why you're here today, is to provide you with some information. A little bit of background from me is I spent 21 years in Canadian Forces, and part of that service was in the Middle East. I'm a little bit familiar with some of the conditions of life in Egypt, Israel, Syria, Jordan, and many of those other countries around that area that are experiencing challenges. So when I became Executive Director of Immigrant Services, I also realized that I was in the Air Force at Mount Lolo when the boat people came in 1980. And this is what brought this agency to life, the society known as Kamloops Caribou Regional Immigrant Society, formed as a result of the boat people. We were tracking the boats off of Navy radars and passing the information on to NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain and North Bay. And so who would have thought that 30 years later, the agency that grew out of the people that were coming to the West Coast would become a part of my life as well. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy you're all here. And please know that if you don't get answers today or you come up with questions tomorrow, bring them to us. Bring them to us anytime. This agency is open to people coming in and asking questions. That's what we do. It's our role in the community. We're a nonprofit agency. We're not an arm of the government. So it's very important for you to know that. And as well, I welcome the panel members and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right, let's get started. Now, the context for the first question is naturally a lot of people, a lot of you and a lot of other people have heard a lot of perspectives on the challenges associated with integrating newcomers into our communities, into our province, into our country. And many people ask me, so what have you been hearing? Have you heard all this? Have you heard all that? And I can say that the number one thing, and this is across the country, this is in our province, this is in Kamloops, the number one comment or question we receive is, I want to help, what can I do, how can I help? And that's really a testament to just how engaged and generous the people in our communities are. So, I want to help, how can I help, what can I do?
Right. We are also a volunteer organization, RAFT is. There's no paid people at all. And so we exist through the generosity and of spirit and in-kind donations and so on. We have been overwhelmed, I will frankly use that word, by what we've been offered and given to support refugees coming to Kamloops. And we're about to, we hope it's happening today, take possession of a storage space, heated storage, which the city is providing for $1 for 6 months. And we can then put together all the items that we've got scattered all over town at the moment, from furniture to bedding and towels and clothing, and goodness me, it's an amazing gift that we've been offered. As well, we've been offered fabulous gifts of skills, whether it is people who are English language tutors and who want to freely give of their time to assist, whether it is I would love to drive someone to the doctor, or make sure they get to school or whatever, because that's also a large part, we do work with immigrant services, but our day-to-day with our families is to ensure that they get connected as well to life in Kamloops as soon as possible. And what else can we do? We continue to fundraise. If we can, the more money we can fundraise, the better the chance that we can bring more families here. And that's from around the world, not just from Syria. We are focusing on Syrians right at the moment because, frankly, they were the families that were the most easily come by. And the whole supply has dried up at the moment, while the focus is on the 25,000 government-sponsored refugees coming. So waiting for families is just nothing new. And it's like waiting until they actually arrive. So we really thank everyone for everything they've given. At the moment, the only thing I know we could use is one set of bunk beds. We've got a small bedroom, and it's going to have 3 children in it. So we're open to that. If other gifts of furnishings and so on are available, we would love to know about it. Raft is delighted to make connections with you, and that's what I have to add to that.
If you're looking to provide financial support, the United Way is fundraising for this particular issue. Raft is also fundraising. There's a variety of different ways. You can also, if you wish to contribute directly to KIS, or Kamloops Caribou Regional Immigrant Society, can do that as well. And tax receipts are available from all the organizations that are involved, United Way, Raft, and from us as well.
Donations. What we received at Immigrant Services are people who call asking of donations of time, skills, money, and goods. That's the 4 basic categories. So, next one on my set is what is being done to ensure that Canadians remain safe?
So, as I understand it, firstly, the refugees that are coming, the Syrian refugees, have been in, I'll say, refugee camps for the past 1, 2, or 3 years, sometimes as long as 4 years. These are not the refugees that you see or the migrants that have crossed into Greece and into Europe. So they have been vetted by the UN High Commission for Refugees. That's the first step. And then they are, once they meet the criteria there, then they are, that is referred to the Canadian government, and they are interviewed, including a security clearance in the Middle East. Mostly right now that's happening in Jordan. But it's also, we have people that are in Lebanon and in Turkey, but mostly it's happening in Jordan. So that's the second stage of vetting. And then the third stage is when they come to Canada, they are also screened, including health, and that's done earlier as well in the earlier phases, but also security clearance interviews that can involve the RCMP or CSIS, and retinal scans and so forth. So there are 3 layers of security vetting. There is no, of course, ever 100% guarantee about what a person may or may not do, but it's a very high level of scrutiny. And the context of this is that, and I wish to emphasize, as I did at the beginning, is that these persons, these refugees, have been in camps for 1, 2, 3 years. They're not somebody who's coming rapidly from, say, another region of the Middle East or Syria and trying to enter Canada. Those people are just not going to get in. So that's the context of what's been happening here.
Let's move on to the Kamloops context, all right? So is there a coordinated effort to tackle the integration of Syrian newcomers in Kamloops, and what people and organizations are involved? I think we have a few hints about that already, but there's more to say. So.
The mayor, the MLAs, myself, Raft, the United Way, Interior Health. There's even word of employers that will be represented on that particular steering committee, and the MP. So there's a coordinated effort, and of course the membership will probably grow in that committee for a little while to ensure that we don't miss anything. Our role, of course, and goal is to ensure that if a service is showing up as a gap, that the government representatives are able to have that gap filled, and that the services that are around that table are able to manage to obtain those services and supports. And one thing that needs to be really clear, this is not a case of resetting priorities, particularly in health. There are not going to be people, and I've heard this a couple of times where people have suggested that, oh, the refugees are coming, so we're going to get bumped off the wait lists, and that is not going to happen. The system is in place to provide for that support without having to bump people and change people and remove people from wait lists. That is not going to happen. Very important for you to know that.
The United Way in that list of people around that table who've done quite a bit, some of you may know that they established a $10,000 fund match so that every donation that comes in gets doubled. So I heard yesterday that they have reached their $10,000 ceiling, so that's a great success.
Just now, prior to coming here, I had my Friday sermon at the mosque, and I emphasized the point that at a community level, we should use our talents in facilitating the needs for the refugees. For example, if we're good in language, and as we know, probably majority of the refugees, or mostly all of them, may speak the Arabic language. So for example, many of us, or of us, who know the Arabic language could utilize this talent for interpretation. Or those of us who are free, we could utilize our driving time, or our cars, our vehicles, to drive them to places that they need to go, such as the mall or grocery shopping, or the kids when they need to go to school. And many other talents at a individual level that we could use.
Also, we were recently brought into that steering committee that Paul has just mentioned. Like, in addition to Minister Lake, Todd Stone, our mayor of the city, Peter Milabar is there, healthcare, school district, RAFT is there, and also United Way. So I guess that's one effort, like, taking at a higher level, how we can integrate all different resources available in the community. I just wanted to describe a little bit how the, this refugee settlement, process is kind of working. Like, just stepping back a little bit here. There is a sponsorship agreement holder status that CIC is giving out. To nonprofit organizations, and there are 95 organizations across Canada who have got that status. We call it SAW, SAH, sponsorship agreement holders, and United Church is one of them. And so basically, all those refugees coming in, they'll be somehow connected to RAFT here through United Church. And then anytime any refugees kind of received here in Kamloops, they'll be brought into Kamloops Immigrant Services, and they'll have the list of resources available. Like, as an association, we have given our list of services and support, available in community here, as exactly what Imam was saying. Like, somebody could support, with transportation, taking them to different appointments, tutoring, schooling, translation, and all those sort of services. So we have listed all those services, and we also would like, if you have, any sort of, ideas in your mind, and if you think that yes, I can support in this manner, then of course, contact RAFT. They will have, a form that you can fill out. But just to give you a brief sort of kind of heads up here, so far what I have been hearing is we have more volunteers than the number of refugees expected in Kamloops.
So, the newcomers, our new neighbors, will also need to set up simple things like a bank account, medical services plan, school enrollment, how to get a bus pass, and permanent housing. Not just temporary housing, but permanent housing. Those are practical ways in which they'll need help as well.
To mention that when people want to offer something, if they have, I have this skill, I have this time to offer, at Immigrant Services, we are building a database of that information as well. We have a person assigned to take care of that. And so yes, you can contact RAF. Yes, you can contact Immigrant Services if you have something to offer. Points. What effects or changes might the integration of Syrian refugees have on our communities? Is this going to change the face of Kamloops?
Nothing really is going to affect or change the face of Kamloops, particularly when it comes to bringing in a few new people that are going to probably add to the diversity of the city. So I really don't think it's going to be an issue.
I heard a statistic the other day says that if all 25,000 Syrian refugees sat in BC Place Stadium all at once, more than half the seats would be empty. So this is a testament to how it's not that giant a number.
It will bring more of a diverse environment in Kamloops, as well as they would, just to add to what Paul was saying, there would be great assets for Kamloops. You know, there'll be doctors, teachers, lawyers amongst them who will benefit our society, who will benefit the individuals in our community as well. And this would be a great picture for Kamloops. This would be a great achievement for Kamloops as well.
And I just want to add one very small detail. The death rate in Canada has exceeded the birth rate since 2006. If we don't plan to do something to bring people in to, of course, and I'm going to say this because I'm getting a little older now, to pay taxes for my retirement, it's going to be difficult to maintain the economy that we have without bringing in newcomers. And I have to say, the newcomers' numbers will have to be greater, a great deal more than 25,000 refugees. I can guarantee you that.
How can people and organizations in Kamloops and the region prepare for newcomers?
The fact that everyone seems to be asking, well, when are they coming? When are they coming? Tells me that we are ready for people to come in. I think it's just a matter of time. We need the time to sort of take its course.
We're not inventing the wheel here. I mean, we've done this many times in our history. I mean, with the exception of Indigenous Canadians, all of us have roots in a foreign country, and many of our family stories are escaping persecution. And you know, most recently in Canada, we've dealt with refugees, the boat people from Vietnam, from Uganda. Prior to that, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and so forth. And after the Second World War, so it's just a question of being organized and being prepared to assist in the ways that have been mentioned earlier today. It goes to the heart of who we are, so it's not a challenge that we haven't met before and won't meet again.
And in this regard, we're like one family. We shouldn't let color or our language or our culture separate us. You know, when they come as a group, when they come as a family, we're there as a family to serve their needs and to facilitate for their ease and success.
I just wanted to add something here, you know, when we talk about, like, you know, are we prepared? Just a question to the audiences here, like, do we know how many refugees Canada takes every year? Anyone knows? About 10,000 refugees. Just because this this event, like, you know, in Syria has come to the surface, you know, we are sort of kind of like, you know, bit anxious about, you know, like, you know, further details. But Canada is taking 10,000 refugees every year. So yes, we are prepared. The other example I would like to give you on this, when we started talking with Raft, going through the details of the sponsorship, that, you know, what sort of funding requirements we have, and when I approached our community here, the Muslim community at the mosque, it took me like less than a week to come up with $10,000 commitment.
And just to put the number of refugees into a little bit of context, Canada receives somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe it's 280,000 not refugees, but immigrants in general per year, and over 70% of those people settle in just 3 cities. You may be able to guess what they are. Down. Refugees have represented somewhere in the neighborhood of 9% of immigrants in Canada per year.
If I could add to that, the number of refugees that Canada has been taking has been in steady decline over the last decade. And that was a government policy. Prior to that, we took in more. So we have restricted the entry of refugees. And I believe that was motivated by prejudice or an ideology that was couched in, well, people are gaming the system. But we have the capacity to take a great many more, and we have. I mean, just the Vietnamese boat people, that was a unique situation. That was a crisis like the Syrian crisis. We took 60,000 when our population was less than it is now. But even on an annualized basis, historically, we've taken more than 10,000 per year, quite a few more than 10,000.
There's often a thought that refugees need to settle in the big cities. And frankly, probably many of the Syrians will have come from very large cities. I don't know the population, and they didn't dwell on it when they were speaking earlier, but there are some very large cities in Syria that are, well over 1 million people and so on. So Kamloops, for instance, is considered a fairly small place. But refugees, especially refugees, if they have sponsors or they have the kind of assistance and support that can be provided by other groups and people in the community, they settle better and more quickly than if they go to a big city and they have to fend for themselves. They may not stay permanently, and by that I mean like 20 years down the road, but if they reach a point of feeling prepared and ready to step out on their own and go wherever they need to go, I consider it a success. Yeah, so our job is to help them settle. As Bill said, get them to school, make sure they know where to open a bank account, where the grocery stores are, and what they can afford. We had a family come once who bought 6 pounds of tomatoes in February. It blew the budget because their income rate is exactly the same as social assistance. So they had practically no food money left, and the tomatoes didn't last that long. But, it's to help them learn from they'd gone to the store themselves. That was the first time they'd gone to the store themselves. It was all progress. So we mark little steps and cheer for them when we can.
The fruits of their coming, the fruits of the refugees, the success that they'll bring about in Canada is also very, very profound. Just one living example, a living success in Toronto, Mohammed Faqih. He came as an immigrant, I believe, from Lebanon, from a very poor background. And through community support, he established a multi-million-dollar franchise, which is called Paramount Foods. And that is now helping not only the community, it's helping many charity organizations as well. So basically, this is the fruits of our efforts, the communal efforts of bringing about refugee families or foreigners who might do good for our economy as well as become living success stories. Yeah.
That's a great point.
But
Faisal,
even if they don't, it shouldn't matter because they're human beings.
Definitely.
That's right.
Thanks, Bill.
What are the needs of refugees when they arrive in our community?
Recently, the experience in Germany has been, and it's very understandable given all the horrors and the great length of this civil conflict in Syria, is that the German experience is that 70% of the refugees suffer some form of trauma. One might think that that's actually a low figure, but in any case, there are going to be complex trauma issues and cultural issues, because in some cultures, I had this conversation earlier over lunch, it may be difficult for example, a woman to talk about her victimization because it may involve shame or dishonoring her family. So these are long-term types of things, but addressing trauma is going to be a long-term need and challenge.
I was approached about a month ago by a local company saying, this year we're placing our charity funds towards something to help the refugees. Do you think there's something that we can do? And I explained that trauma counseling is difficult to access because it's quite a common occurrence. And so they provided a donation towards a trauma fund for counseling specifically directed through Kamloops Immigrant Services. And United Way matched their donation of $1,000. So we have to date $2,000 that will go towards assisting emergency trauma counseling where they may not have access to it under the healthcare system in a timely manner. And so those are things that you can do if you wish to provide that kind of support for trauma. It is available. And when you make a donation, you can actually direct where that donation is applied. And so for a fund like this, there is no administrative dollars that come off of it. It's all directed to the trauma counseling. So,
To my understanding, I mean, I can stand to be corrected, but for a private sponsorship group, the equivalent amount of dollars is equivalent to what would be given in income assistance, for example, in British Columbia in a year. So that's not a lot of money for people to survive on and manage themselves. The British Columbia government has committed $1 million, but it's not clear what that usage will be. So it may not be, for example, for health, or it may not be for trauma. So that's why we may need to very much depend on private donations and private contributions by people who are skilled counselors and professionals to address these types of issues around the emotional psychological trauma.
I'd like to say that one of the big surprises we've had in Kamloops is that there are people who are skilled and trained at trauma counseling. They're not high profile, probably for obvious reasons, but they're available and they're offering their services, and it's remarkable. So we will be able to fulfill the need for the small number that we've got coming right now. If Kamloops were to be inundated with a lot of the government refugees, and by a lot, I mean several hundred at once, it would be difficult. But we're in good shape right at the moment, and it's another one of those wonderful gifts that's out there in the community and being freely offered.
Approach this topic, but once a refugee arrives, what, from their perspective, what do they need to do to work towards independence and integration?
come to Kamloops Immigrant Services and register. Register as a client so that we have a client file that we can then address needs, assessment orientation, and support services, which equals working with RAFT as well.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I was going to say learn English. Put your efforts into learning English initially. If a family comes and there is pretty good English skills in the family already, TRU has a wonderful ESL program, and you can upgrade. I mean, can do accreditation of academic documents if they're fortunate enough to bring them through Kamloops Immigrant Services. We're turning into a love fest here.
It's a team effort.
Well, it is a team effort, yeah. The biggest challenge that I know of that we face is affordable, decent housing for a family, because a family of 5 has $750 a month for shelter. It is impossible, and that is intended to include utilities. So it's a huge challenge. Yeah.
Question would be learn from their talents, let them benefit from your talents, and make them welcome in the Kamloops community, in the Kamloops family. And this would be the best thing that we could do.
I was reading in the Globe and Mail recently that sponsored refugees tend to do very well in the community. And I have to say that I don't really know that much about the difference between government-sponsored and privately sponsored.
Some people don't understand the term asylum seeker. Asylum seeker is somebody who is not yet recognized as a refugee. When you are recognized as a refugee, meaning you are, the legal definition historically has been a well-founded fear of persecution based on your race, your nationality, your religion, so forth. There are 3 categories. 1, a refugee claimant, a person who comes on their own to Canada. and they seek asylum, and they have to go through the Immigration and Refugee Board for decision to see if they meet that definition. So they're already within the borders of Canada. Number two is the sponsored from abroad, private or government-assisted. So this government-assisted refugees, they're the 25,000 that the federal government's talking about. That means the government will be approving them, and the government will be stepping forward with funding to support them, as I understand it. The third category is privately sponsored refugees, which is what most of the discussion here has entailed. And to give an example, that would involve a group of 5 people stepping forward to say, we're going to sponsor a refugee or a refugee family. You have to be a citizen or a permanent resident to be part of that group of, say, 5. You have to be over age 18. You have to have some financial capacity. You have to have the settlement capacity, and you have to have a commitment to support that refugee or refugee family for 12 months. And then there's an application form, and that includes medical security, a criminal law check for you if you're one of the 5, and a primary applicant can also do it as a family. You can do it as a family as well if you're one of the, it's not just you do it in your own name, but you can do it in the name of your family, as I understand it. One other thing, the Syrian refugees are already recognized, the ones that are coming to Canada, as prima facie refugees. So the burden of proof is lessened for them because of the crisis. The crisis is so acute. And so there's faster processing of Syrians, there's more visa officers, there's more staff, there's greater leniency when people don't complete the form properly or don't have all the photos or ID because they may have lost that in their displacement. So that's basically what it is. And then the key aspect of it is the financial costs of private sponsorship. You are undertaking that responsibility. And as I said, I believe it's equivalent to the total financial amount to what income assistance would be in British Columbia for 1 year.
There is one other aspect to sponsorship that Bill didn't mention, and that is what's called the Blended Visa Office Referred Program. And it is a combination of government support and financial input for 6 months. A sponsorship is a year from the date the refugee arrives in Canada. So it doesn't start before that. But anyway, the government pays for 6 months, and the private sponsor pays for the other 6 months. And so it makes it way more affordable for groups to participate in sponsorship, and it's why RAFT can have more families, actually, because we do try and operate through the BVOR program. Yeah.
So just to sum up what Bill and Martha has said, just to kind of give you a summary here. So there is a PSR, privately sponsored refugees, and there is GAR, Government Assistant Refugee Program, and there is BVOR that Martha has said. With the first one, privately sponsored refugees, which Bill was saying, like, a group of 5 or any community group can come forward and sponsor, they're responsible, like financially responsible for those refugees for about 12-month period. Government Assistant Refugees Program, same thing. Government is responsible for 12-month period. For the BVOR, it's the 6-month split between the private sponsors and the government.
But the private sponsor is responsible for the social.
Right, that's right. And what Martha is saying is, but although like private sponsors are responsible financially for the 6-month period, but as far as the social responsibility is, they are responsible for the full 12-month period.
So I just try to suggest something to form a subcommittee from various professional field, like if one doctor, one engineering, one teacher, one from so that we get some idea about the refugee, their degree, what is their education before they come, so that we give them some directions to say, if you like to have, for example, if the refugee family, they have some engineering degree, then we say, you may have to get some what's called update or just to get licensed in Canada so that he can practice. If he's a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, we give some guidance to them for in terms of professional so that it will be their way become faster rather than they struggle and they figure out about the way. So before they come, if we have a form subcommittee, so that and get some idea about their educations, then this subcommittee or the committee can give some direction to this family before, as soon as they come, they know how they establish.
We do have, kind of similar, framework here. What we are following is exactly a ditto framework of what RAFT is following. So they have people with different skill set formed into subcommittees. So people have translator in each committee, and then doctors, and similar to ours. In our community we have number of people have come forward. There are doctors in there, there are professors, teachers, all different skill set are there. And I think what Dr. Tawhid is saying, we would expand on that, instead of just keeping it to one organization, maybe cross-organizational. So I think that's the intent of working together, or having that collaborative approach here. So we'll be working through RAFT, and we'll be bringing the list of our volunteers to them, and then also seeking if there is room to improve on those, formation of committees through there.
At Immigrant Services, we have a number of services that are directly funded by the government to provide this type of support in settlement, which means that, first of all, refugees are automatically considered eligible clients under the contracts that we have. And so they can access the same kinds of needs assessment, definition of what they have. We then make contact with the organizations to work on the skills approach and recognition. So all of these are available in the community, but they're also available at Immigrant Services. So a person does have a certain degree of choice and a certain amount of support that they can reach when they're ready. It's important to know that, if they don't have a house to live in, it's going to be difficult to look for work. So we have to put things in a sort of a priority system to assist the refugees. And the first thing to do is do a needs assessment. And that's what we can do here. RAFT, I understand, is also doing that. And I believe the mosque groups are also doing that. So we are certainly available. And that's what we are here for, is to provide that service support. So absolutely, I think that skills and housing and all of these things need to be met in a certain sense of priority.
So we're in the midst of a Canadian winter. So what plans have we got for shelter if 4 families were to arrive tomorrow?
We have confirmed housing for one family. We have been in touch with one of the, make that 2 of our families, sorry. I missed Clearwater. One of our families is going to live in Clearwater, so that's half of them. The others, because we have no idea when they're coming. I don't have a problem personally with finding a decent place and paying for an empty apartment for a month or so. But 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 months, and we don't know when these people are coming, it's not necessarily a good investment of money that's been donated to us. So we kind of play it by ear. We're in touch with at least one of the rental property management companies in town. And I think the city steering committee is about to bring some housing folk on board as well. So we would use temporary housing if we had to, small places, or there are offers of sharing someone's house. That's not desirable in the long run because it's not the family's home. They can't necessarily cook what they want when they want, or act the way they often would, or feel they can come and go and so on their own terms. But for short term, we would utilize that. And we've had several offers of very gracious folk who would be happy to have people come and stay with them for a bit. So. The government-sponsored refugees, when they arrive, have financial assistance. At this moment in time, RAFT is more than willing to work with them because we have so many volunteers who want to be part of meeting people and welcoming them. But it is not a mandated program as such. So I think we can make it work.
Absolutely. We've also had a number of community members that have housing available and have placed their name on the list and have said basically, when people arrive and they're looking for a place to live, please contact us, and if we do have apartments available, we'll definitely be working with you. Again, the key issue is we can't ask someone who's renting apartments to hold those apartments indefinitely, but definitely there is availability, and these things will come to fruition. The government assisted as well as the private sponsorship are treated pretty well the same when it comes to housing, and arrival times are the key issue.
I wouldn't draw the assumption that the government's going to do all these things. I think the government's going to let them in and cut the check.
Yeah,
But they're still going to, I don't think the government's going to find the apartment for them and help them set up their bank account. So that's where we have to step forward as citizens.
and Raft is
Yes.
also prepared to play a part.
I want to know who is deciding that Kamloops doesn't have any refugees yet, and should we be phoning Kathy McLeod?
It would be nice if they could be handled that way, but the problem we have here is this is a combination. I know that initially there was a number that came out where someone suggested that we probably would be looking at 100 to 150 refugees. You have to understand that those numbers are based on an assessment of the total numbers coming into the larger centers, and then someone saying, okay, so we've got widgets was the thinking that was happening. They were thinking more in terms of widgets than people. People have choices and decisions to make, and they don't make those decisions over there, and once they get here is when they can make that decision. So if they're choosing to live in Kamloops, if 500 choose to live in Kamloops, then we will do the best we can to accommodate and support that, and so will government. But ultimately, the refugees do have a certain degree of choice as to where they would prefer living, and I think that that's important because all immigrants have the same choice. We have the same choice, and so it would be unfair to expect them to make the choice that a politician would make the choice for them. I don't think calling Kathy McLeod will help in this situation.
Regarding the government-assisted refugees, usually they don't send them to other areas than the like Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, because of one thing. Those cities have something called Welcome House. So on this Welcome House, they receive them for a transition period for from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. So if you don't have this facility here and you don't have something called, I think, RAP program, Resettlement Assistance Program, then they will not send them to Kamloops, for example. But they will keep them for the transition period, which is like 3 weeks or 2 weeks up to 6 weeks. Then the government will decide what to do with them. They may send them to you guys after like these 6 weeks. They may keep them in Vancouver, Metro Vancouver. As like Christy Clark suggested, that she would like to see some families go to Prince George after this transition period, which is like 6 weeks. So it's not because they don't want to send them to Kamloops or any other place, but because they don't have the service, the RAB service, in your area. Other than that, they will send them right away to you.
And that you can definitely call Kathy McLeod about and explain that we need that funding in Kamloops in order to provide that level of service, and I think it would be practical. And please understand that the dollars that come are accounted for in nonprofits. We are not just going to take these dollars and run. We have to show service. We have to show what we are doing to support the use of those dollars. So yes, that you can call Kathy McLeod's office and say, how about funding the local agency here and to support government-assisted refugees?
So the RAP program is provided to refugees in Kamloops. That is how the BVOR, the Blended Visa Office Referred privately sponsored families receive their government funding and so on, and all the paperwork is done through the RAP program out of Vancouver. So it can be provided here. There's not an office. It is long distance. It's a little not as convenient. But heck, if you live in Vancouver, they don't welcome you into the RAP office anyway. You still have to do it on the computer or by phone. So, you know, like, it can happen. It's the government's choice to have changed the process.
I know that Kamloops is a place of diversity, but I've lived here only so long, so I have some questions. How many people in Kamloops actually speak Arabic?
I speak Arabic.
Yeah. Yay. Thank you. Yay. Yay. Because I think that's rather important and will be really helpful.
A whole lot, particularly at TRU.
And
Right,
and not to
Yeah.
forget all those international, students who are coming from the Middle East. They all, most of them speak Arabic. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the imam services have imams or educators elsewhere who could provide assistance in the Arabic language online as well as through telephone and whatnot.
So one of the issues that's come up recently in the newspaper is within some of the camps have been the discrimination of lesbian, gay, and bisexual and transgendered individuals. And I know that this is probably a tough discussion as it is intersection of sexual orientation, gender, and religion or cultural context, but it's an important one of these individuals' safety. And how are they supported in the transition into Canada? And I know it's been also difficult, just any LGBT person immigrating to Canada with our present laws. And I was wondering if anyone can provide a little bit more context and information on that, any of that process.
The government announced that their focus and priority is going to be on families. And that includes, I would say, for the most part, exclusion of single males. Now, I know that doesn't capture what you're talking about, but I think that example suggests that there will be exclusion, consciously or not. The focus is going to likely be on families, and that's going to be probably a very traditional focus. One could debate. I have a great deal of difficulty with just even the idea of single males being excluded, because a very good argument can be made that in many ways, young males are very vulnerable in Syria. They are either recruited or targeted because they are the first threat by the enemy, and they have to leave a single male behind who's in a refugee camp only fuels bitterness and despair, and likely a vulnerable person who could be recruited into radicalism, who gives up really on the institutions and the values that we claim we stand for. So I haven't answered your question really. What I'm getting at is I don't think it's in the discussion, what you're raising, and the priority of discussion. I think that's the truth of it.
That IRCC, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, as it's now called, there is a program. It's quiet, it's small, but it is available, and they recognize that LGBTI folk are especially vulnerable. I don't know about males at this moment in time coming out of Syria. I can't speak specifically to that, but they do recognize the vulnerability of the gay and lesbian population, and they have programs. We did sponsor one family of gay folk, and they have chosen to move on out of Kamloops, and that's their choice. But it was a normal sponsorship just like any other, with the exception that we purposely chose this particular couple. So there are ways. It's just quiet, it's not high profile, and it won't be. There's no special funding or anything for it. It's just there.
I mean, under the general refugee claimant category, the traditional one, that is accommodated, that is understood. I think that, you know, for example, if this was addressed politically with the government in Ottawa, that might go down the chain to their visa officers, their immigration officers, refugee interviewers, and then they might be implementing something and be aware of that. But it's really not been on the radar, and given the speed of which the refugees are the target of the government for 10,000 by, well, within 13 days, right? December 31, and then 25,000 by the end of February, I expect that this has not been part of the discussion given the speed and the expediency of getting refugees here. And likely it's not addressed. Unless it is addressed politically through pressure and awareness.
I would like to recognize that the refugees arriving are new Canadians, and it's very important that, as a member of RAFT, we look at how we're protecting these people arriving in our community. Part of that is getting criminal record checks for anybody that's going to be interacting with them, which also limits the amount of people that we can have just volunteering off the street, so to speak. But I would like to invite the panel to speak further about how we are ensuring that these new Canadians who are arriving in our community are safe and how their privacy is maintained as they arrive with lots of people who will want to be taking their pictures and whatnot and sharing that broadly.
You know, here today we have a friendly crowd, but it's not so friendly out there. Most of you will have had experience recently on Facebook where a great many people have said, I'm unfriending some of my friends because I thought I knew who they were, because of the prejudice and the bigotry and the intensity of the discussion on this issue. And we've just come through one of the most mean-spirited and racist federal election campaigns in our history. And as a candidate, I can tell you, on the doorstep, I heard a great deal of bigotry that offended me. Hatred, ignorance, bigotry, and also targeted at me. So the reality is that although we have goodwill here and we're motivated to continue the humanitarian tradition, and I believe most Canadians are. We have seen the finer aspects of the character of this country in the last few weeks. But the fact of the matter is there are people out there who are ignorant, who are racist, who are bigoted, and are mean. And so we have to be vigilant to ensure that any newcomers, that they are protected, that we are sensitive to what may or may not happen to them, and also those who are already here. And that means having discussion with our families and our neighbors and our friends and in community groups, and you know, writing letters to the editor to appeal to the finer angels in our character, which I believe is the real Canadian character. But let's not be naive. There is a great deal of bigotry and hatred out there. And I experienced far too much of it on the campaign trail. And so, you know, we don't want our new neighbors to be treated cruelly and degraded and dehumanized just by virtue of who they are when they arrive and are living amongst us.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, very good.
As a nonprofit organization, we are also charged with the privacy and protecting the privacy and the confidentiality of who we see and what services we provide and to whom. So that is part of our, not just our policy, but it is a requirement of our contracts. So when people call, for example, and say, well, we understand somebody's here, we can't discuss it, period. We can't discuss names, we can't discuss clients, and it's part of our job. So it's important to recognize that. So the protection of the people's information is part of my responsibility and every staff member's responsibility here. And we do that. To give you some examples, though, of bigotry, about three and a half years ago, we were downtown at the time. The office was on First in Victoria. And there was a couple from Europe that had come, and they were of color. And a car went by them while they were walking on the sidewalk. And yelled out racial slurs and told them to go back where they came from. So they went back to England. They were business people. They were coming here to set up a business in Kamloops. Kamloops lost a multi-million-dollar business proposition at that point because that family said, I don't want to bring my kids to this kind of bigotry. And they left. You know, the interesting thing is they weren't from Africa, they were from England. And so we never know. So when I experience this and I see this, I'm usually the one that'll come up and say, you know, you're wrong. And I'm in people's faces that way. I try to be diplomatic, but there comes a time when diplomacy has to step aside and you have to be clear with people. And so that's the clarity. We will not accept bigotry or mistreatment of people here. And it doesn't matter who comes in the door, they receive the same services here, whether they're First Nations or they're the most recent newcomer to Kamloops.
All right, I see a hand in the back.
You just touched on the subject of privacy. I think we, as volunteers, no matter what you do, got to keep that in mind too. So the things you discuss with them or the things you encounter with them, just keep it to yourself. I think that's really important.
That's one of the reasons our volunteers undergo a certain amount of credential recognition and checking on criminal records checks. But also, I think we're going to, in light of this, we're going to have to implement a bit of an onboarding because we've got quite a few more volunteers, but an onboarding process where we share the importance of privacy and discussions that we may have or you may have with newcomers and how important it is to keep that privacy.
I think there should be a community effort as well to give the refugees some sort sense of an encouragement or some sort of an encouragement when they arrive, and if by chance they do face some prejudice or bigotry, not to be shy in reporting it. You know, I've experienced many cases while counseling. It's oftentimes married couples that one of the couples who are facing some sort of torture or some sort of a negative effect from from their spouse, that they're shy oftentimes to report it. It should be either at a personal level or a community encouragement that we encourage. We encourage the refugees or those who are coming to our town to be brave about their situation. If they're facing anything, they should ask for help, seek help from the authorities, or seek help from senior community members or people who will make a difference in their lives or resolve that situation.
I learned earlier today that one of our guests, Nader, his children are in French immersion. And my daughter is also in French immersion, but she has two first languages, which are English and Korean. So this is the kind of multiculturalism that many of you in this room represent, and that is part of the existing fabric of Kamloops.
Yeah, either Nader or Rahim could add onto it, but as far as I understand, I think there are many Syrians who speak French, many of them.
Yeah.
So it is very likely that, we get, Syrian refugees here in Kamloops and they're already speaking French. So as Imam was saying, there would be an opportunity for us to maybe learn French from them, teach them English.
On that topic, I think a lot of the accommodation availability is on the North Shore at the rate that we are able to help, and there's no French immersion on the North Shore anymore.
What we're doing here is a response to the problem. You know, what's happening in Syria. And one of the earlier guests this morning, one of you gentlemen, I forget which one, had said something about, we've really got to stop the problem, what's happening in Syria. And I wasn't sure what you would think would be the solution. How do you feel about the Liberal government approach to pulling troops out of, or, pulling our support out of Syria? I guess I would like to know what could be a potential solution.
I think part of the problem now is that it's too complicated. It reached a point where it's not really easy to find a solution. I think the problem is that the international community has been watching and just waiting, hoping for something to happen. As a matter of fact, in contrary to that, they have been actually fueling the war by using the area as a proxy war. So I don't have really the solution. I don't think anybody would have like a magic recipe. However, the approach, so there are a few things. There is the military action, which probably nobody would dispute a certain level of military action that could be needed. However, we are fighting an ideology, and we just have to look through history. Ideology has never been defeated by military only. It needs to be defeated by ideology, right? It needs to be defeated by addressing the issues that created the ideology. And I don't think those issues that created the ideologies are not known to us. They are known to many people. They're known to the governments. They're known to organizations, think tanks. They know about them. So I think the international community has a responsibility to address those issues. Number one, it's very, very important. And to prepare and support and be behind all the initiatives that can help into defeating this ideology. And obviously security and safety is very important to all of us, and we have to deal with it in a reasonable, efficient manner. I mean, part of the problem is that we are reacting without thoughtful, I would say, without thoughtful process. So I was saying earlier that ISIS has been doing massacres and killing a lot of people. We only started to hear about them when they started to hit our doors. Just before the Paris attack, 2 days before that, there was a suicide bombing in Beirut. They killed like over 40, 50 people. Just few days before that, there were like suicide bombs in Baghdad. There are suicide bombers like in the Middle East like has never seen before. Before 9/11, there was pretty much zero suicide bombing in the area. Now, with all the billions, the trillions of dollars that we have been spending on fighting terrorism, it's increasing. So there's something wrong. So I think we need to look at that. We have to review it. We shouldn't be reactive without taking the right decision. I mean, isolating people, not allowing, I mean, I don't want to speak, you know, it can go on and on and on. But bottom line is we need to be thoughtful with our decisions. We need to make sure that we are putting the right effort into the right way and path. And I think we can do that collectively. I mean, it's not impossible. And we can just look in history and we can find our ways into the future peacefully.
This morning, I believe that John Kerry was meeting with Vladimir Putin, and it's the first time, I believe, in 4.5 years that there's some positive sign, because there seemed to be issues on which they agreed. And so maybe, it's a long maybe, something positive will come out of that. Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, has said that it's absurd to hold up any potential peace discussions even, or let alone an agreement, because of one man. That's Bashar al-Assad. So maybe something can come out of that. I do agree that long-term it's based on ideology, but in the short term there needs to be some type of ceasefire, at least as far as if the Assad government can be brought on board. Daesh or ISIL, if whatever you want to call it, is a different thing. But, you know, aside from Syria, there are 60 million refugees in the world. And the UN has said that this is likely to increase massive displacement of people. They may not legally even fit the definition of refugees, but they're people that are displaced. And we heard that, you know, there's about 8 million people displaced internally in Syria this morning. and 5 million outside of the country. And the UN has identified 5 major areas of concern in the future. One is hydrometeorological disasters, floods, hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, and mudslides. That displaces people. Number 2, evacuation, where people are forced to be evacuated from zones designated by governments as being too high risk or dangerous for human habitation. Number 3, population movements because of environmental degradation and slow onset because of climate change, so reduction of water availability, desertification, recurrent flooding, salinization of coastal zones, and so forth. Number 4, the submersion of small island states due to rising sea levels. And number 5, violent conflict triggered by a decrease in essential resources, such as water, land, food, owing to climate change. So really, at a global level, I mean, we're dealing with Syria now. We must. It's a violent conflict. But this problem is going to become more acute unless we deal with the issue of not just climate change, but poverty. Poverty and gross inequality and a lack of the basic fundamentals of human needs like water and sanitation and land to grow food and crops and so forth. So this is about addressing root causes. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with more and more of these types of situations. And so it's mindful as we leave today, we're doing our small little part to do what we can about the Syrian refugee families that are coming here. But there are 60 million refugees in the world.
Does anybody here have an answer to overpopulation, which is increasing all the time? Because that's the elephant in the room. Without that, I think we're talking around in circles.
Well, you know, I'm old enough to remember the discussion in the 70s when they used to say, well, you know, Malthus had this mathematical formula and we're all hooped because of the population is going to create a massive crisis in the world. But the reality is that all the evidence shows that when there is economic development and basic human needs are met, the birth rate rapidly declines. And in many, this is a success in many parts of the world. It's not always all doom and gloom. There are many, many countries. Bangladesh is an example, where with greater economic development, the birth rate has rapidly declined. So in order to even address the issue of population increase, you need to improve the economic and social living conditions of people, and fundamental to that, of course, is peace and security. But if people have a decent place to live, and they have food and water and proper toilets and hopefully schools and health care, then that reduces the population increases as well. And if you educate the girl child, and you educate women, it doesn't just reduce the birth rate, it's a phenomenal spur to economic growth. So those are the kind of things that need to be done to really address the issues of population increases, but a small part of the overall problem of disparity, conflict, and acute poverty. And we know that there's one thing that's, ignorance is more expensive than education.
I watched a TED talk, and it was about population explosion, and they really pointed out that it's under control. And that's a very interesting, so if you have that concern, I would suggest you go into the TED and find there's some very excellent discussions on population and immigration.
Very much. Thank you. Not only here and today, but if people record a video message of welcome today, then I hope they will encourage their friends and their relatives to do so from home and respond to the video messages that we will be posting on our events page and on our web page and on our Facebook. And to you yourself, take up this torch and send your own messages to the people who will be coming to our community. Thank you very much.